We are reading A Course in Miracles. We're on chapter 17, Forgiveness and the Holy Relationship. And today we are reading section 3, Shadows of the Past. To forgive is merely to remember only the loving thoughts you gave in the past and those that were given you. All the rest must be forgotten. Forgiveness is a selective remembering, based not on your selection. For the shadow figures you would make immortal are, quote, enemies, unquote, of reality. Be willing to forgive the Son of God for what he did not do. The shadow figures are the witnesses you bring with you to demonstrate he did what he did not. Because you bring them, you will hear them. And you who keep them by your own selection do not understand how they came into your mind and what their purpose is. They represent the evil that you think was done to you. You bring them with you only that you may return evil for evil, hoping that their witness will enable you to think guiltily of another and not harm yourself. They speak so clearly for the separation that no one not obsessed with keeping separation could hear them. They offer you the quote, reasons, unquote, why you should enter into unholy alliances to support the ego's goals and make your relationships the witness to its power. It is these shadow figures that would make the ego holy in your sight and teach you what you do to keep it safe is really love. The shadow figures always speak for vengeance, and all relationships into which they enter are totally insane. Without exception, these relationships have as their purpose the exclusion of the truth about the other and of yourself. This is why you see in both what is not there and make of both the slaves of vengeance, and why whatever reminds you of your past grievances attracts you and seems to go by the name of love, no matter how distorted the associations by which you arrive at the connection may be. And finally, why all such relationships become attempts at union through the body, for only bodies can be seen as means for vengeance. That bodies are central to all unholy relationships is evident. Your own experience has taught you this. But what you may not realize are all the reasons that go to make the relationship unholy. For unholiness seeks to reinforce itself, as holiness does, by gathering to itself what it perceives as like itself. In the unholy relationship, it is not the body of the other with which union is attempted, but the bodies of those who are not there. For even the body of the other, already a severely limited perception of him, is not the central focus as it is, or in entirety. What can be used for fantasies of vengeance, and what can be most readily associated with those on whom vengeance is really sought, is centered on and separated off as being the only parts of value. Every step taken in the making, the maintaining, and the breaking off of the unholy relationship is a move toward further fragmentation and unreality. The shadow figures enter more and more, and the one in whom they seem to be decreases in importance. Time is indeed unkind to the unholy relationship, for time is cruel in the ego's hands, as it is kind when used for gentleness. The attraction of the unholy relationship begins to fade and to be questioned almost at once. Once it is formed, doubt must enter in because its purpose is impossible. The, quote, ideal, unquote, of the unholy relationship thus becomes one in which the reality of the other does not enter at all to, quote, spoil, unquote, the dream. And the less the other really brings to the relationship, the, quote, better, unquote, it becomes. Thus the attempt at union becomes a way of excluding even the one with whom the union was sought. For it was formed to get him out of it and join with fantasies in uninterrupted, quote, bliss, unquote. How can the Holy Spirit bring his interpretation of the body as a means of communication into relationships whose only purpose is separation from reality? What forgiveness is enables him to do so. If all but loving thoughts has been forgotten, what remains is eternal. And the transformed past is made like the present. No longer does the past conflict with now. This continuity extends the present by increasing its reality and its value in your perception of it. In these loving thoughts is the spark of beauty hidden in the ugliness of the unholy relationship where hatred is remembered, yet there to come alive as the relationship is given to him who gives it life and beauty. That is why atonement centers on the past, which is the source of separation and where it must be undone. For separation must be corrected where it was made. The ego seeks to, quote, resolve, unquote, its problems, not at their source, but where they were not made. And thus it seeks to guarantee there will be no solution. The Holy Spirit wants only to make his resolutions complete and perfect, and so he seeks and finds the source of problems where it is, and there undoes it. And with each step in his undoing is the separation more and more undone, and union brought closer. He is not at all confused by any, quote, reasons for, unquote, for separation. All he perceives in separation is that it must be undone. Let him uncover the hidden spark of beauty in your relationships and show it to you. Its loveliness will so attract you that you will be unwilling ever to lose sight of it again. And you will let the spark transform the relationship so you can see it more and more. For you will want it more and more and become increasingly unwilling to let it be hidden from you. And you will learn to seek for and establish the conditions in which this beauty can be seen. All this you will do gladly if you but let him hold the spark before you, to light your way and make it clear to you. God's Son is one. Whom God has joined as one, the ego cannot put asunder. The spark of holiness must be safe, however hidden it may be, in every relationship. For the creator of the one relationship has left no part of it without himself. This is the only part of the relationship the Holy Spirit sees, because he knows that only this is true. You have made the relationship unreal and therefore unholy by seeing it where it is not and as it is not. Give the past to him who can change your mind about it for you. But first, be sure you fully realize what you have made the past to represent and why. The past becomes the justification for entering into a continuing unholy alliance with the ego against the present. For the present is forgiveness. Therefore, the relationships the unholy alliance dictates are not perceived nor felt as now. Yet the frame of reference to which the present is referred for meaning is an illusion of the past, in which those elements that fit the purpose of the unholy alliance are retained and all the rest let go. And what is thus let go is all the truth the past could ever offer to the present as witnesses for its reality. What is kept but witnesses to the reality of dreams. It is still up to you to choose to join with truth or with illusion. But remember that to choose one is to let the other go. Which one you choose, you will endow with beauty and reality, because the choice depends on which you value more. The spark of beauty or the veil of ugliness, the real world or the world of guilt and fear, truth or illusion, freedom or slavery. It is all the same. For you can never choose except between God and the ego. Thought systems are but true or false, and all their attributes come simply from what they are. Only the thoughts of God are true, and all that follows from them come from what they are, and is as true as is the holy source from which they came. My holy brother, I will enter into all your relationships and step between you and your fantasies. Let my relationship to you be real to you, and let me bring reality to your perception of your brothers. They were not created to enable you to hurt yourself through them. They were created to create with you. This is the truth that I would interpose between you and your goal of madness. Be not separate from me, and let not the holy purpose of atonement be lost to you in dreams of vengeance. Relationships in which such dreams are cherished have excluded me. Let me enter in the name of God and bring you peace, that you may offer peace to me. Let's talk just for a moment about that last little section, that little last paragraph. Jesus begins it by saying, my holy brother. Now remember that this message is coming through Helen Schuckman. She was the scribe of A Course in Miracles. someone, I watched a video just recently where someone said that this was automatic writing. It might have been a form of automatic writing. I don't know if it was exactly automatic writing. Maybe a little bit different, but I'm going to do a little research on that. But my point that I want to make is Jesus is saying to Helen, my holy brother. Now, the Course does not use the word sister. It only uses the word brother. And I just discovered that, first of all, we know that Helen knew the King James Version translation of the Bible very well. Right? She was very familiar with it. And when the Course quotes the Bible, which it does often, like there's a quote here where the thing about divorce in the Gospels is not quoted exactly, but it's referenced where Jesus says, "Whom God has joined as one, the ego cannot put asunder." Now, so Helen knew the King James translation quite well. In that translation, as I understand it, there's a Greek word, I believe it's something like adelphoi, which generally got translated as brothers. But in more recent translations, it's now being translated as brothers and sisters or brethren. It tends to be more inclusive, whereas the Course speaks exclusively about brother, uses the word brother. Maybe because of the King James Version, or maybe just to keep it simple. I don't know. It's an open question. But obviously the Course does not just mean brother. When the Course uses the word brother, it means every other. So this is not just a relationship between you and someone else. This could be this is every relationship. Every relationship, and every relationship is either God or the ego. In every relationship you have that choice to make it holy or unholy. If it's unholy, you're following the ego's thought system. And if it's holy, you're following the thought system of the Holy Spirit, which is the thought system of God. God does not have a thought system per se, but the Holy Spirit's thought system is completely opposite of the ego's thought system. The ego's thought system is one to keep, is based in the idea of separation, and its whole purpose is to keep the separation going for as long as possible. And in doing so, it will tend to see the past in terms of vengeance, in terms of sin, and what your brother did to you to harm you, for which you can never forgive them, and you will never let that go. If you really follow the ego, that is. And a few of us really follow the ego, and I think that's a point that Jesus is making here, is that we don't completely follow the ego. We waver back and forth. Sometimes we follow the ego, and we follow those thoughts of vengeance, and we follow those thoughts of unforgiveness, and we make them real, and we exclude the Holy Spirit's thought system of love and forgiveness. That, as Jesus says at the beginning, to forgive is merely to remember only the loving thoughts you gave in the past and those that were given you. To only remember, like nothing else. There's nothing else except the loving thoughts. Only the loving thoughts, only loving thoughts are real. Only loving thoughts are true. Only love is real. Everything else is illusory and is part of that ego thought system, which is really unreal and does not really exist. It only exists to the extent that we make it real in our minds. But the reality is, it is not true at all. It is nothing. It's really shadow. It's the ego is very much the shadow. That's a Jungian term, the shadow, right? We talk about doing shadow work, and we talk about looking at the self-sabotage that we do, and those part of that part of ourselves which seems to be hell-bent on suffering and shame and guilt, etc., etc. And the Course does not generally use that term. It uses the term ego. Not that Jesus in the Course was not aware of it, of course, because Jesus was aware of Freud, talks about Freud, uses Freudian terminology, probably uses Jungian terminology as well. I'm not that clear on that, but the shadow was a Jungian term, right? And the ego would essentially be the shadow, right? And so this whole section here, it is these shadow figures that would make the ego holy in your sight and teach you what you do to keep it safe is really love. The shadow figures always speak for vengeance, and all relationships into which they enter are totally insane. Whenever we see our brother as a means to make him, where we want to make our brother feel guilty through anger or through judgment, we're reinforcing the ego's thought system, both for our brother and for ourselves. Because when we do that to our brother, we actually do it to ourselves. And it's ultimately coming, we only have that anger. All anger and all judgment really is self-anger and self-judgment. It's nothing else. There's only one self. According to the Course, according to the atonement principle, there is only one self. The atonement principle is the separation from God never happened. We are still one with God. In that oneness, in that wholeness, we are all together. We are all one in that. If I try to make someone else feel guilty or blame another, I'm only doing that I've only done that to myself. I can only do that because I've already done that to myself. I am not at peace, and I'm just proving it by what I'm doing. That's just demonstrating my lack of peace. It's very simple. This is all very simple, but not easy in terms of the actual practice of it, putting it into practice. How easy is it to just remember the past in terms of the loving thoughts? That's not that easy. We tend to go into the past and see it through the eyes of judgment and pain. And part of our way of thinking is, how can I ever live down all the things I've done in the past? How can I ever heal the past? How can I ever heal my trauma? That seems to be impossible. And Jesus comes and says, what seems to be impossible for you is not impossible for God. Because, as Jesus said in the Gospels, with God, all things are possible. And even more than that, all of that could be healed in a moment if you would only let it. And if you only had the will, that's how fast it could go. And many people have had that experience. And many people have had the experience of holding on to stuff for a very long time and getting more and more bitter and more, letting all of that weigh them down and becoming sick and tired and sick and more sick and tired, right? Anyway, there's a lot being said. Once again, I have to say, there's a lot of nuances here. I'm not getting into all the little nuances of each section here. I'm trying to provide more of an overview and more of like a user-friendly interpretation or commentary on this. Be willing to forgive the Son of God for what he did not do. So again, this is the atonement principle. The separation never happened, which means that anything you think that your brother did to you is not real. Never happened really in reality. And that's the atonement. And when you remember that, and you remember, I have no reason whatsoever to hold anything against anyone, that, there you are. That's the acceptance of the atonement. I have there's no reason to feel anything other than joy. And to be in the peace of God and the unconditional love and the unconditional non-judgment. So thank you for listening, and we're going to continue. Next section is called The Two Pictures. Thank you for listening. See you soon. Bye-bye.